Good afternoon, dear colleagues. We'll start just in 3 or 4 minutes. And we will start with the welcome words and the welcome speeches from our distinguished guests and the main, so to say, organizers of this event. And later we'll have the plenary session. And after this, we will work in the sections which are presented in the program. So just 2-3 minutes and we'll start. I think that we can start. As I see, there are almost 30 participants in our meeting, in our conference. And first of all, I'm really honored, and it's a real pleasure for me to be present here today, to start this conference, to start this meeting, and to have some speech at the beginning. And it's a real pleasure for us to be the part of this international scientific and practical conference, Recovery of Ukraine, Historical Experience and Prospects After the Victory. This conference is dedicated to the 75th anniversary of the Marshall Plan program and in support of initiative of the President of Ukraine, United24. And we will work today in 3 sections. The first section is post-war reconstruction of Ukraine, search for strategy, problems, and prospects. The next session is about the reconstruction of Western countries after World War I and World War II. And the third section about Ukraine and the world in the post-war international relations, history and present. And we'll start today with some welcome words from our distinguished administration, from our vice rectors. As we know that our rector of Taras Shevchenko National University of Kyiv, Volodymyr Bugrov, had intention and really wanted to participate in our conference, but he has some important meeting. So today we will start with the talk and the welcome words of Ksenia Smirnova. She is Vice Rector for International Cooperation of our university. So please take the floor.
Dear esteemed guests, dear organizers, your excellencies, our esteemed partners, and of course our honored student society and all our academic society. I'm really very glad to be here, and for me it's very great honor just to start and to break this ice within this conference. But I will start maybe with not all the general words and general statements. We all know that after the Second World War in 1947, the then US Secretary of State, George Marshall, suggested setting up the European Recovery Program to help rebuild much of Europe, which had been destroyed in the war. Today, this scheme was proposed to Ukraine and now is commonly known as the Marshall Plan for Ukraine. This is the very important issue that we're stressing now during the war about the reconstruction and about the further and future Marshall Plan for Ukraine. The most important issue now to discuss the ways of rebuilding Ukraine, and this rebuilding process requires funding akin to the Second World War Marshall Plan. As Ukraine continues to count its losses, it's up to our partners, US and the European Union, to start preparing a plan to help its recovery and make Europe more resilient to all the threats that we are facing now nowadays. Ukraine now, similarly as the Europe after the Second World War, has an opportunity to leapfrog the generation of technologies, to green its energy system, and to be involved in all that integrational process when they were started within Europe. It's really very symbolical for us to start with the Marshall Plan for Ukraine and to discuss all that new roots of our rebuilding. These are first and foremost tasks for all Ukrainians. Of course, we have a lot of kind of basic things to recover and to rebuild. This will include major investments, rebuilding basic critical infrastructure, roads, bridges, schools, hospitals, modernization of the whole Ukrainian economy to help prepare to join the European Union in the coming years and in the very nearest future. And all that plan is really built on that issue. I'm very glad to see here all our partners from different parts of the world. Through the ocean, we are combining within our platform all our friends and partners. For us, it's really very important to discuss the issues of the recovery through the prism of the historical dimension, through the prism of the youth population and their young visions of that plan for recovery. For us, it's really very important to discuss these issues on academic level. That's why I'm sure that this conference would be the very great platform as the first attempt to discuss and to share all our visions of the rebuilding from different parts of the world. I'm very glad that here we are combining not only academic society, but the members of parliament and the civil society participants, NGOs, representatives of NGOs. I'm very esteemed, I am very honored to have here, and I can see here our esteemed partners from our partnership with University of Maryland, BAS. I'm very pleased. And I'm sure that the conclusions and the main results of that conference will be included into and will be used as a platform for practical contribution. We all committed to have our dreams come true. We have our main dream to rebuild, recover better. Sometimes to build the new issues. So we are all committed on that. And I'm sure that with all our contribution, we could really make these practical efforts for the recovery. I wish you the inspiration, and I wish you the very successful discussion. I'm honestly really very curious on these discussions on the topics. So if I may, I also will be hearing you and also be among you. And I wish you all fruitful discussions. And of course, as we can say, Slava Ukraini.
Thank you. And now I want to give the word to Ганна Толстанова, Vice-Rector for Scientific Work of the Taras Shevchenko National University of Kyiv.
Dear guests, dear colleagues, and I think all the students, they are also our colleagues because they already organize such great events in our university. Today, the topic of the current conference is very important. And I'm really admired that our young generation, the students of our University were the main drivers for this event. And what is the most important for me as a vice rector of research at Taras Shevchenko National University, that in panel discussion will participate both scientists and the businessmen, and also people who have their influence on the political situation in our country. I think the symbiosis, the synergy between the research, real analysis of our former experience, of the former historical experience of other countries, which they are in similar situation, which supposed to recover after war. This analysis and this knowledge which the scientists and the students can bring and show how the political establishment can help. And also their symbiosis between the researchers and political establishment, also businessmen can create the real plan. The real plan with real KPIs, with the real roadmap, how to rebuild Ukraine. And for me, also very important and has some significant meaning that on the panel we have the students. And students are the future of our country. And as a higher education institutions, our university must provide, first of all, the platform for creative development of young generation, of future of this country. And I think by this conference, we will meet this goal. And of course, we are really interested in the main conclusions of this conference and hope very much that they will be translated to the real results. Thank you very much and good luck.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank our dear vice rectors and rector of our university who during the war supported the students and also made a strong effort to continue the educational process in our university. And it's also interesting that our conference is held in the support of our buildings. As we know, after shelling, our university was in some stage or in some part destroyed by the bombs. But we now providing this conference, make some charitable membership fee and so on, and trying also to help our university to reconstruct and to continue the high quality educational process. And also we are glad and we are happy for the support that was provided from the point of organizers. As Mikhailo, who is sitting beside me, he started the initiative of this conference. He provided the idea for us, and we simultaneously supported this initiative of our student, and started to plan with our administration, with our professors, and now we are sitting here. So I think that this process and the plans were carefully and on the high level realized. And now we are coming to the next our speaker, the head of the Department of Modern and Contemporary History of Foreign Countries, the guarantor of the educational program American and European Studies. And we all here, the students who are sitting here, are the students of this educational program. So we are very glad to see our professor, our dear the guarantor of program. So we provide the word and provide the floor to Oleg Mashevsky. Please, Mr. Mashevsky.
Так, доброго дня, шановні пані проректори, шановні друзі, шановні колеги, шановні учасники конференції. Нині Україна і світ переживають одні з ключових періодів своєї історії. Питання бути чи не бути, відстоїмо чи не відстоїмо ми свободу, цивілізацію для себе і для всього людства. В такі періоди древні казали, що як йде війна, розмовляють гармати, то музи, наука, освіта мовчить. Але це спростував великий Черчилль, легендарний прем'єр-міністр Британії часів Другої світової війни, коли йому запропонували скоротити фінансування освіти і науки Великої Британії в період війни, то він сказав, а за що ж ми тоді воюємо? Так і нині такі наукові заходи, безумовно, на часі, тим паче, тим більше присвячені такі актуальні, нагальні проблемі. І знаково, що ініціатором організації наукового заходу і взагалі цієї ініціативи стосовно відродження, відбудови України, університету Шевченка, є студенти освітньої програми Американістика, Європейські студії, Едуард Кузьменко, Іван Фечко, Михайло Гібер. І ми звикли, що наші студенти розглядають історію України, історію нашої держави через призму світової історії, використовуючи весь світовий досвід, світовий потенціал, який, безумовно, допомагає творити те, що нині Україна творить на диво всьому людству, фактично на брамі цивілізації, на брамі Європи зупиняє цю російську орду зі Сходу, російське варварство. Конференція присвячена досвіду відбудови повоєнної Європи, досвіду Плану Маршалла, коли американські інвестиції і європейська енергія, патріотизм, працелюбність європейців створили економічне диво повоєнне в Європі. І нині Україна одне диво сотворила, що вже зупинила фактично і відкине назад за кордони України російську орду. І, по суті, ще одне диво створює, тобто освіта, наука, взагалі, як то кажуть, будь-яка позитивна активність в Україні зберігається і набирає нового потенціалу, нової енергії. Тут досвід відбудови у нас вже позитивний є. На прикладі Шевченкового університету двічі російські ракети потрапляли фактично біля корпусів університету, руйнування спричиняли, і це все відбудовувалося, це все відроджувалося, науковий освітній процес успішно триває. Це робилося за допомогою академічної спільноти, яка згуртована навколо керівництва університету, навколо ректора Володимира Анатолійовича Бугрова, за допомогою, за підтримки держави, і величезну роль відіграли іноземні спонсори, іноземні партнери, іноземні інвестори. Тому спасибі нашим друзям, нашим партнерам, закордонним, американським партнерам, які беруть участь у цій ініціативі, у цьому заході. І разом, сподіваюсь, переконані, ми відстоїмо Україну і відродимо Україну, як це робили європейці успішно після Другої світової війни. Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Героям слава! Thank you, Mr. Mashevsky, for your support of this conference and for your speech. And now we want to start our plenary meeting. Yes, and the first plenary speaker is Svetoslav Jurash, but we should wait a few minutes for him. And I think we can continue with Piotr Kosicki, professor of history at the University of Maryland, author of 9 volumes, most recently with Wolf Kaiser, Political Exile in the Global 20th Century. Mr. Piotr, please, it's your word.
Good afternoon, good morning. Hopefully you can hear me well. First of all, let me thank Mr. Edward Kuzmenko for the invitation, the entire organizing committee. My sincere thanks to Vice Rector Smirnova for putting me in contact with the organizing committee, and more generally for welcoming the University of Maryland into a partnership with Taras Shevchenko, Kyiv National University. I hope for great things from our collaboration together in the years to come. This is only the beginning. So I'm pleased to be invited to take part in this brainstorming and scientific conversation about the new beginnings that we are all going to undertake. I would say a great deal. I didn't realize that I was going to go first per the program, but I'm perfectly happy also to say a few words. I think about the Marshall Plan itself. I'm a historian, so I am, of course, somewhat limited in terms of my confidence in being able to project the readings of historical source materials from the past onto exactly what will happen in the future. However, I would like to offer a few different reflections, and some of them are going to be maybe a little bit more scientific, and some of them are going to be a little bit more practical or even particularly political. The first, Mr. Kuzmenko, if I project something through Zoom, will you see it in the room?
Try, we will give you the
Okay, well, it doesn't really matter. I was simply going to share a quotation, but it's not really necessary. I'll just read it. I think George Marshall, General Marshall, when he delivered his speech at Harvard University in 1947 to announce the Marshall Plan, gave a speech that lasted probably less than my speech to you will last today. It was a 12-minute speech. He was a military man. He was a man of very concise expression. He wanted to define the stakes and to explain as much to his American audience as internationally what mattered about announcing such a plan. And of course, the goal that he put front and center was a twofold goal: reconstruction and peace. And those two were completely indivisible and inseparable from one another. However, and this is the part that I want to read to you all because it is on my mind all the time, as someone who unfortunately is most of the time very far away from the heroic work that you and your countrymen are doing every day in the fight against Russia, but also the fight for improving your own future. And that is the fact that we in the United States, in North America, but also elsewhere in Europe, all too easily become disconnected. So Marshall, already when he was announcing the plan, worried about the following. I'm quoting from George Marshall. "The problem is one of such enormous complexity that the very massive facts presented to the public by press and radio make it exceedingly difficult for the man in the street to reach a clear appraisal of the situation. Furthermore, the people of this country," he meant the United States, "are distant from what Marshall's calling the troubled areas of the earth, and it is hard for them to comprehend the plight and consequent reactions of the long-suffering peoples, and the effect of those reactions on their governments in connection with our efforts to promote peace in the world." Why do I bring this up? Because I think one of the key points that with which we begin already in Marshall's reflections is that support among the populations of the countries that are crucial to anything that will be tantamount to a Marshall Plan for Ukraine is essential. It's an ongoing process. It needs to be continually reinforced and requires, I think, a creative way of approaching some of the models that are indeed bequeathed to us by World War II. And I would argue some of the models that are bequeathed to us by the democratic transitions of 1989 to 1991. And this includes a list of both do's, if I may put it this way, rather American way, and don'ts, positive and negative lessons. Among the positive lessons that I think are crucial for reinforcing public support on both sides of the Atlantic and really ensuring that there isn't a such a critical mass of voices that would in any way threaten or undermine or derail or diminish, because of course we have to talk, I'm not an economist, but we're talking about enormous amounts of money. The Marshall Plan was a massive endeavor, and it needs to be admitted as such also for our 21st century equivalent that we're talking about today. So the case of Western Europe's recovery after World War II was predicated on one core example, which is very difficult to replicate: the reconciliation of France and Germany. In some ways, I think that it's best articulated in the famous speech given by the French Foreign Minister Robert Schuman when he was announcing the Schuman Plan in 1950. The Schuman Plan, which became the blueprint for the European coal and steel community, which in turn became the foundation of what today we call the European Union, which Ukraine should and needs to join. The way we think about the origins of the of the European Union is in reference to trying to neutralize and reconcile with what remained of a fascist state after World War II. Now, what does this mean in terms of the kinds of lessons we can take from history? That there were individual relationships. And here, I don't know if you've seen the proposed title of the presentation I'm giving today. I had said that I wanted to talk about Christian Democrats. And I wanted to be clear, of course, Angela Merkel, not too long ago, still the head of Germany's main political party and chancellor, leader of the Christian Democratic Union, is part of a long tradition here. But if we look back to the 1940s and 50s, we're talking about politicians who were just emerging and trying to find each other across complicated lines of ideological, national division and distrust. And the manner in which they built trust was by asserting a common foundation of values. Now, in their case, religion played a role. Religion doesn't need to play a role. I think Christian democracy as a political family in the tradition of the European Union has shown that it is possible to have a political family that is built by deeply religious people, but then expanded into what political scientists call a catch-all movement that nonetheless retains and projects values. I'm very impressed. I was rereading articles from about a year ago in Ukraińska Prawda's English edition, which I regularly share with my colleagues. There was a wonderful article by a theologian and sergeant in the Ukrainian army named Andriy Andrushkiv, who argued in June of last year, it was the Christian Democrats in the governments of various European countries who revived their countries from the ashes of World War II. And then talking about Ukraine today, our struggle, our resistance, and the daily approach of common victory are in one way or another rooted in the fact that dignity, solidarity, subsidiarity, and the common good are all important to us. And all these words are not from PowerPoint slides or analytical reports, but the daily reality of millions of citizens, soldiers, volunteers, doctors, social workers. Very often, without saying all this out loud, we build approaches on the principles of Christian democracy. So invoking that frame here lets me do two things. First, I can say that there were people, specific people we can point to historically. Robert Schuman, Konrad Adenauer, founder of West German Bundesrepublik, Alcide de Gasperi, the founder of post-fascist Italy after World War II, who were able to come together and speak a common language and share certain sets of values and develop bilateral relationships that yielded what my historical colleague Wolfram Kaiser calls entrepreneurial leadership. That doesn't mean business. That means developing creative and innovative solutions that can cut through red tape, that can circumvent the kind of public doubts that Marshall was worried about, and that can assure an intergovernmental cooperation. This, I think, is a profound lesson from the process of Western Europe's response to the Marshall Plan after World War II, and something that can't be emulated, of course. I'm not talking about imitation. That's impossible. Even if it were possible, it would be ill-advised. But something that I think is worth considering is the notion that Ukraine is going to be recovering as a country that is seeking to integrate with an existing community, within existing structures, which creates both opportunities and challenges. The Germans, the French, the Italians had leaders who found each other through bilateral relationships and used those to build a greater political culture, a shared political culture together. Schuman in 1950 contended that solidarity in production will make it plain that any war between France and Germany becomes not merely unthinkable, but materially impossible. There's something which is implied here about our 21st century situation, which I might as well say explicitly. I don't expect that Russia will be part of this reconciliation process. Right? In 1945, we were looking at a Germany that was post-fascist, decapitated, defeated, which the United States was in the process of re-adjudicating and reintegrating into the international community. I don't know what Russia will look like in a few years. And in some sense, we need to focus on us, on the story in front of us, on Ukraine. So the story cannot be one of reconciliation. The story has to be one of finding partners, of shared values. That is, I think, absolutely essential, but not simply on the assumption that there is a bilateral process of reconciliation. Ukraine already has friends in Poland, friends in Czechia, friends in Romania, friends in Slovakia, etc. We can keep pulling and lengthening the list. Friends in Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia. Western Europe is always more complicated. And these bilateral relationships are where what that entrepreneurial leadership really needs to look like, I think, moving forward. You know, where will Ukrainian leaders, where will President Zelensky find the true counterparts to help create a transnational space for when the money seems threatening to dry up and creative solutions are needed and more pressure can be applied? Because it can't only be bilateral, but it needs to be bilateral at its roots. And I think we've seen that the president does a wonderful job of this, and it's some further plan that can be brought into bear. And here's the last point I want to make, because I know that my speech is already getting a bit lengthy. I think that from my own experience as a comparative historian, frequently studying the process of reconciliation and reconstruction after World War II, as compared to the transformations of Central and Eastern Europe after the collapse of the Soviet bloc and the Soviet Union, I can say this. In the late 1980s, Christian Democrats were still very powerful in Italy and especially in West Germany, in Austria, and a few other countries of Western Europe, Belgium, the Netherlands. The Germans in particular, through their Konrad Adenauer Foundation, which has a marvelous and important presence throughout the world. They have a lot of soft power, but a lot of funds, and they can participate and they can help. In 1988, or Poles in 1989, and try to teach them how to build democracy. And you would almost see a post-colonial relationship emerging. And I think this is one of the reasons why Christian democracy, even though it provided a great deal of the funding for reconstruction of political culture, of integration with European Union after the end of the Soviet bloc, nonetheless is actually quite weak in terms of its traditional political values in much of post-communist Europe, especially in Poland, which after all is arguably the most Catholic country in Europe. And the paradox, I think, lays in the attitude and the power dynamic that was transferred or implied. And this is something that I think is very important. Whatever political family, whatever set of values, we can call them Christian democracy, we can call them any kind of democracy, as long as it's pluralistic and predicated on rule of law and integration with the international order. But it cannot be predicated on a new post-colonial relationship. It has to involve partnership. And that is a great challenge. That's something that Marshall foresaw as a challenge in terms of public support at home. It's something that Schuman foresaw as a challenge, and that's why he sought to build such close bilateral ties with specific leaders. And he was lucky. Adenauer lived a long time. Schuman lived a long time. They had 15 years, even though they were already quite old men, to build these relationships and find other friends. And that's something that President Zelensky and the other leaders of Ukraine will need to continue doing, is also to make sure that it's not just diktats coming from the West, but in fact, an equitable relationship of back and forth and of integration. And that's a challenge. By the same token, if a long-term pluralistic political ethos is to be part of the peaceful consequences of reconstruction through a Marshall Plan for Ukraine, it is essential to learn from those lessons. Thank you all for your attention. I'm happy to discuss any questions. Slava Ukraini!
Героям слава. Thank you for your profound research, for your interesting and important thoughts, and also for accepting the invitation to our conference. We are really glad to see you, to hear you, and the results of your research. And now we come to our next speaker. The next speaker is Chloe Sen, Senior Business Director of Microsoft and former board co-president of Isaac School Foundation, Washington, USA. And the speech will be on the theme Project Peace, American Volunteers Teach Ukrainian Youth, a wartime program to support uninterrupted studies and prepare for post-war challenges. So please, Chloe.
Well, it's a great honor to be here, and thank you very much for having us. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we see.
Awesome. So joining me today are my two children, so Leo Chen and Emily Chen as well. And it's an honor to share with you our story about the initiative Kids Helping Kids, where technology and compassion will make it happen. So in today's presentation, what you can expect is we will quickly cover the introduction, and then we will talk about a global challenge, how us as a family responded, and also the power of learning in unbearable times. And looking forward, we are hopeful for the future. So first off, I'm going to hand it over to Leo and Emily to do a self-introduction.
I'm Leo Chen. I'm a 10th grade student at Skylar High School. I'm volunteering and the co-president for Hannah Henley Code Club.
Hi, I'm Emily Chen. I'm 6th grade in Pine Lake Middle School. And
Yeah, and when we first initiate this project, we are very fortunate to have partner Sergey, who is the coordinator and mentor in Ukraine. And as myself, I'm also being the mentor to the volunteer groups here in the United States, and we initiated and funded this program. And so when we think about the terrible war that has happened, it has a huge impact globally, not only for the lives in the Ukrainian living in the war zone, but also globally as well. So as a family, we were having a dinner conversation, and then my kids were talking about how can we help the displaced kids. Right? and to continue learning during these unbearable times. So Leo and Emily's vision is to have kids helping kids and during these exceptional times, and where we can act local and impact global. Leo and Emily, why don't you share about why do you want to initiate this program to help others?
So I want to be the light that sheds, I want to be the candle that sheds light and give warmth. And I want to teach them what I'm been able to learn. So that's like my initial thoughts for why creating this program.
I want to help the kids in Ukraine because most of them lost their homes, and I feel really bad for them. So I want to help lift them up.
And then this program, we were not the only ones that were doing it. After funding the project, so very quickly, we have the student volunteers in the United States also join Leo, Emily in this effort. So Leo, as the and Emily as the student volunteer leaders. Leo, would you like to introduce your friends and then briefly talk about what you teach and then pass it on to Emily?
So I taught HTML in the course, and then Lawrence and Emily taught English with Jacob Wang. And Leo Lee taught Scratch, Bruce Chan taught math, and that's it.
And Emily, during your English course, and what did you share with the students in class? And what was the feedback?
I taught English, and I also taught about the culture in America, like the schools in America, and like how it is in the schools. I also taught a little bit about like the holidays.
That is awesome. And this, as everyone can see, with the partnerships of Sergey and the local volunteers in Ukraine, we were able to put together a 2-week STEM summer camp, which is for science, technology, engineering, and math for STEM summer camp for 36 students in a hybrid learning model where there are students learning online as well as in a safe place with a shelter during the summer camp in Ukraine as well. And the resilience and strength for all of the students and volunteers in Ukraine are truly inspirational. And when we finish of the 2-week STEM summer camp, and all of the students have passed the test and received the certificate. So a big thank you for our project partner, volunteers, and the nonprofit partner, Your Kindness, City Council, and school districts in Ukraine. The impacts on the students, both for Ukraine and USA, is significant. The message we have received from the students in Ukraine was this has brought a great deal of hope for students, and it provided them with a safe place where they can focus on learning, focus on the things that gives them energy, and to think about the future skill set and knowledge they need to require. What we heard, these are only 2 of my favorite quotes from our students in Ukraine who participated in the STEM summer camp, talked about how this program has helped to bridge that cultural bridge and geographic bridge and across the world. And the course has really connected the hearts of these young generation, even it's across the ocean. And also another kid, Anastasia, in addition to Alexander, Anastasia also talked about it's great that the kids wake up before 6 o'clock in the morning and then to teach with what they know. And they did it from their hearts. And now that the kids have the knowledge of programming, and it's important for the future life. So when we think about the impact across the ocean of this international student volunteer project, it definitely has benefited not only the Ukraine students, but also for the United States volunteers. So this program, if we think about it, it really has prepared the Ukraine students, like all of our wartime programs that supporting the uninterrupted education with these international student service project, is to prepare students for getting ready for the post-war challenges, giving that sense of hope and connection across the world, and then growing also students the leadership skill, prepare them for future career development. And we know these skill sets and knowledge they learn will help them no matter what they want to do in the future. The younger generation is so capable, and they are destined to achieve really amazing things. It will also have strengthened the resilience of the students, connecting them with the peers so that they can reach their full potentials. And when we think about the impact for the student volunteers in the United States, this experience also has helped our student volunteers to grow leadership skills, having that servant leadership to give back to the community, to paying it forward, even though we don't know each other at the beginning of the course, but teaching and sharing what we have learned and giving that helpful hand, we certainly can lift each other up. So this Kids Helping Kids program is also a compassionate community service leadership program where we can create a society and connecting with the young hearts and help students to reach potential. And in the United States, this is a really important skill set, not only about the knowledge, but also how do you give back? How do you do more good to help more people who are in need? So this Kids Helping Kids program is exactly doing that. When we think about the purpose for school and education, it's really creating giving the skill set for students to be able to learn new knowledge and learning how to work in groups and how to use their skill sets to get ready for the future, and acquiring that human skills that has compassion, kindness, helpfulness, so that we can be greater than our own self. And the values we make in this world will sustain us through life. And the strength of character through these difficult times and the knowledge we learn uninterrupted during the unbearable times is going to help us sustain us through life. And that is why we do it and why we wanted to continue to help more people. So looking ahead, we are very hopeful for the younger generation for the future. There are already plans underway for a new round of Kids Helping Kids offering. Leo and Emily are starting to design that with the partnership of Sergey and the volunteers. I should also call out, when there are disruption, there's no electricity or internet. It is very important to have the books so that the students can continue to learn, and that uninterrupted learning can build a better future. So we are grateful for the partnership with Sergey Vakarin and Ivan Stepenring and to look at how to fundraise and continue with the publication of books and helping students in need to continue learn. And we certainly hope to inspire more people with our story and then to bring more people along the journey to help more children in need. So lastly, I would like to say a big thank you for the audience for the opportunity today. And also, we are very hopeful for the future of the younger generation. They are stronger than we can imagine, and they are destined to do great things. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you and your family for the support of Ukraine. And that's really a very important project that you do. And next, I want to invite to the speech Mr. Oleg Dunda, member of the Parliament of Ukraine, chairman of the Subcommittee on Construction and Design, with his speech about mechanism of the new Marshall Plan. Пане Олеже, просимо вас.
Дуже дякую за запрошення. Мене чути? Все добре?
Так.
Видно, чути? Я присутній. Так. Ще раз хотів би подякувати за запрошення. Це дуже велика і важлива тема, безумовно. Але є деякі нюанси. Нюанси полягають в тому, що ми вже, скільки, здається, вже півроку, як говоримо про новітній план Маршалла для України. Але постійно робиться акцент і наголос, що це план Маршалла для України. Безумовно. Україна його потребує. Але не говориться про другу частину, про те, що цей Маршалл дуже потребують і наші західні партнери. Це є рух з двостороннім, це є вулиця з двостороннім рухом, назустріч один одному. Не може бути план Маршалла для України, на відновлення України без врахування позиції і врахування майбутнього безпосередньо для наших західних партнерів. Про що я говорю? Якщо ми згадаємо минуле, і вже про це згадували, план Маршалла – це був план, який відбудовував Західну Європу. Але цей план Маршалла був потрібен в тому числі і для Сполучених Штатів Америки, які таким чином отримали додатковий двигун для своєї економіки і розвинення своєї економіки після Другої світової війни. Нічого не змінилося. При відновленні України, треба розуміти, це вже озвучили і МВФ, і інші міжнародні експерти, відновлення України потребує сотні мільярдів доларів для фінансування цього відновлення. Ці гроші існують. Наприклад, Сполучені Штати заморозили активи Центробанку Росії на суму близько 300 мільярдів. Це тільки Сполучені Штати. Відповідно, джерела фінансування є. Але виникає питання про те, що Україна, якщо дивитися з точки зору лише України, Україна не спроможня досить швидко зробити це відновлення. Чому? Бо в Україні, як свого часу після Другої світової війни у країнах Західної Європи немає технологічної можливості, ну, давайте чесно це говорити, немає достатньо трудових ресурсів, не буде достатньо до того, щоб там на протязі 3-4 років відновити всю Україну, і немає інтелектуальної можливості. Бо якщо ми там наведемо приклад той же Бородянки, немає сенсу відновлювати Бородянку в тому вигляді, яка була станом на 24 лютого 2022 року. Ну, відновлювати у вигляді колишньої радянської спадщини немає жодного сенсу. Якщо відновлювати, то це повинна бути повністю модернізована надсучасна країна, яка повинна бути з точки зору своєї спроможності лідером Європи, а не бути якоюсь там невеликим додатком до Європи. Відповідно, всі ці надбання і технічні можливості, вони є на Заході. Більше того, Україна не спроможня самостійно використати ці ресурси. В будь-якому разі до цього потрібно залучати передові компанії, технологічні компанії з Великобританії, з Франції, з Німеччини, Сполучених Штатів. І відповідно виникає інше питання. А чи отримують від цього відновлення зиск ті ж Сполучені Штати? Звісно, отримують. Бо якщо ми залучаємо, а безумовно це буде робитися, залучати найкращі компанії з західного світу, це додаткові робочі місця для західного світу, для західних компаній, додаткові доходи, додатковий ринок, додаткове поле для технологічних випробувань і технологічних досліджень. відповідно, це дає додатковий поштовх для розвитку західної економіки. Бо за останніми прогнозами, найближчим часом зростання ВВП Західної Європи та Сполучених Штатів Америки буде близько 2%. Це недостатньо. І в даному вигляді саме відновлення України дасть додатковий поштовх, як свого часу план Маршалла дав додатковий поштовх Сполученим Штатам, додатковий поштовх для розвитку західної економіки, саме в економічній конкуренції. І якщо це так буде відбуватися, а так безумовно буде відбуватися, воно призведе до того, що Україна стане надсучасною економічно і технологічною державою. Як це я вже зазначив, що немає сенсу відбудовувати Україну у вигляді радянського нащадку. І відповідно так стається, що Україна стає технологічним лідером Європейського Союзу. І не може бути іншого варіанту, як Україна є частиною цієї частини світу. Але виникає інше питання. Якщо ця концепція реалізовується, а тільки вона може реалізовуватися, яким чином це може бути реалізовано? Бо є різні варіанти, як залучати ці кошти, як їх використовувати, як приймати рішення. І в даному випадку відповідь на це питання дає сам український народ. Що я маю на увазі? Ми за останній рік бачили наочно і публічно про те, що не розумів західний світ до цього. Україна сильна, дуже сильна, в першу чергу, своїм індивідуалізмом, своїм народом. Тобто тоді, коли постає питання вимоги до безпосередньо українського громадянина, всі починають гуртуватися і працювати на благо. Коли воно децентралізоване в першу чергу, коли кожна людина розуміє, для чого вона це робить, яка її мета, і готова боронити свою державу. Це ж стосується, безумовно, і відбудови України. Тому найкращий шлях, якщо ми вважаємо за потрібне, зробити це дуже швидко і дуже якісно, йти шляхом децентралізації. Що я маю на увазі? Це, в першу чергу, працювати через місцеві громади. Не через центральний уряд, центральний бюджет, а щоб фонд відновлення, який надавав гроші і фінансував, він працював відновлення через місцеві громади, які краще знають, що їм потрібно робити. Більше того, таким чином відбудовується конкуренція між громадами за ці кошти. Хто краще відбудує, хто запропонує кращий план відбудови, хто запропонує більш сучасний погляд на відбудову, і хто буде готовий долучатися, не тільки просити гроші, а залучати свої власні ресурси. Тобто конкуренція понад усе. І друга частина – це через приватний бізнес, фінансування приватного бізнесу. Люди, які відповідають за реалізацію проєкту, безумовно, своїм майном, своїм майбутнім, в першу чергу, своїм успіхом, вони більш будуть зацікавлені зробити це більш ефективно і корисніше. І це є два головних механізми, як відновлення, як поєднати успішність відновлення з планом, з успішністю розвитком економік західних країн. І саме в цьому напрямку, наскільки мені відомо, ми нещодавно розмовляли з представниками Великобританії, Сполучених Штатів, буквально на тому тижні. Саме вони це вже зрозуміли, і вони намагаються це використовувати і робити ці механізми саме таким чином, через громади і приватний бізнес. Інших шляхів у нас не існує. І в даному випадку роль центральних органів влади, вона все ж таки не розподіляюча, а така собі консультуюча і допоміжна. Ще раз, українці виграють війну своїми власними руками, і вони відбудують Україну своїми власними руками на децентралізованому рівні. Інших варіантів не існує. І лише в такому вигляді, при такій концепції, Україна може постати як лідер демократичного світу, як не країна, яка потребує постійно в якихось вливань і допомоги західного світу, а як країна, яка буде направляти і розвивати в першу чергу наших західних партнерів, бути таким собі маяком або прапором, на який будуть рівнятися. І я закликаю всіх доєднатися до цього і реалізувати цю концепцію саме в такому рівні. Все інше, воно буде лише затягувати час, воно буде лише буде неефективним і може призвести, врешті-решт, до розчарування. Але, ще раз зауважу, коли ми підходимо до відновлення, потрібно казати не тільки про Україну, а про мету і цілі наших західних партнерів. Лише дорога з двостороннім рухом призведе нас до успіху. Дуже дякую за увагу.
Thank you for your speech. Thank you for your thoughts. And it's also interesting that just for about 1 month ago, I listened to your speech during the roundtable, which was about the reintegration of the Donbas and Crimea in the GDIP Media Center. And I think that your thoughts will help our country in the practical way. So again, thank you. And now I want to introduce and give the word to Sergei Vakarin. He is the head of Ukraine East. Also, he is the ambassador of Legacy Ukraine project. And today he will tell us about the Ukraine rebuilding strategy in the 2030 Lessons for Ukraine edition. Problems and perspectives of innovation-based development of Ukraine and recommendations of North American partners. So, please.
Yes, can we start the presentation? Oh, thank you so much. Yes, and the first slide. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much for inviting me, and it's a great conference that we have already heard from the previous speakers, and I'm really delighted that even in the previous presentation we heard that we need to not just rebuild Ukraine in the sense of the word rebuild. We need to think how to renovate it. Like we don't need to rebuild it in the form of the previous, if you like, Soviet, like as Oleg said, form. We need to think about new forms. And so, next page, please. In order to make no mistakes here, in order to find a good strategy, I tried to find various ways to summarize different aspects of the strategy, and in fact many strategies have been written, many foresights and other plans, but the issue is how to do it in an integrated way. So in order to for Ukraine to become prosperous and to have sustainable economic development, what we need is unified strategies that would combine economic, scientific, technical, educational, and other aspects. And the key issue here is for sure what is this strength that Ukraine can use in order to get an economic breakthrough in the current polarized world, and also what is the best way to achieve its security and defense. Can we have the next slide? Because we have the current defense and security environment, which is completely different from the previous centuries. It is hybrid wars, it is the multi-domain war, which has new and unknown threats, which we witnessed during this year. And so how do we find our way, not just as sort of single successes, like you can see in the screen, the rockets that were used to sink the famous or now infamous Moscow cruiser ship. So this is an example of the multi-domain war in a classical way, because the rockets were used against the sea domain, against a ship. But here we have new domains, and I will come to them later. The thing I wanted to stress here is that there are various probabilities and unknowns, but we need to have this in our plans as well. And effective planning processes. This is the key to getting this done. From the outset of Ukraine, it happens that my adult life started with Ukraine's independence. And one thing that helped me in starting this process was that when Ukrainian hryvnia was introduced, it was a very volatile situation. The economy was really in a free fall. And we wanted to find the way for the new currency not to follow the way of the Soviet ruble. And for this, we needed a strategy that would not just have good indicators for hryvnia as a currency, but also supported with various economic, financial, and other measures. And even at that stage, I wrote a book. It's now 25 years, quarter century since then. It was a book on investments in Ukraine. And yes, in this book, it was a strategy how to make Ukrainian economy investment and innovation based. Unfortunately, there was a lot of processes that prevented full implementation of these ideas that we had in the 1990s. But at least we managed to make Ukraine's strengths in the IT and innovation areas that were implemented in various startups. Ukraine became famous not just as a granary of the world, but also as a IT powerhouse in the world. And this was really good because other areas like the space suffered because we had to sever our links with Russia, with former partners who became our enemies. So in the space industry, we also need to find new forms of partnerships like participating in, well, our programmers are working for Elon Musk, but we also need to be not just individual successes, but we need to have partnerships, global partnerships in which Ukraine participates, like the lunar program, which hopefully Ukraine will also take part in. And well, I hope for the time we have the Ukrainian flag on the moon. So from that time, we worked a lot with our team, and the particular case, as I mentioned, IT, it gave birth to many Ukrainian startups and startups of Ukrainian origin. Some of them were presented in the Silicon Valley, and from that time on, we switched also our focus to education, which is an area that gets not that much attention as it really needs. So we started education programs. One of them was mentioned by Chloe Zhang earlier on in this conference. And so this is an example, a book about robotics and artificial intelligence that was done. We did it for Ukrainian students. So this is also a question about Ukrainian language literature, because most of the scientific literature, like on the mathematics and natural science, most of it is in Russian. So it's also a big question how to support Ukrainian students who also need Ukrainian books, books in Ukrainian, like on popular science and so on. On the order of Ministry of Education, we also did some books on STEAM, which is a version of STEM. STEM, I'm sure everyone knows, but just to emphasize, it's an American approach, which in fact started from the time when John Kennedy said that Soviet Union became the first in the space because of school education advantage. So they started this STEM idea, which is science, technology, engineer, and mathematics. Then it also evolved into STEAM, and this is books on STEAM and STREAM, which include also arts, robotics, reasoning, reading and writing. So these are the books that were ordered by the Ministry of Education and also local education authorities in Ukrainian cities, including Kyiv. But then we moved to the time, now let us have the next slide, when, okay, we started to participate in global events, and since 2014, Ukraine got its attention in the world. We participated in many forums. There is a Ukrainian house in Davos, World Economic Forum, and this is all good. You know, we discussed, we participated in all of these strategies, but then suddenly there is a corona crisis coming, then suddenly there is a war coming, and many of these ideas, of these brilliant ideas, they are good, they are still continuing, but we have this big black swan and another big black swan, which make us rethink about all of these things, because you know, there are these fashionable words like trends, like mega trends, macro trends, hyper trends. But the problem is that after these black swans are coming, you have to rewrite all of this almost from the scratch. So it's again coming back to this issue that we need a probability-based planning based on science, based on for example, if we take the war is both science and art. So we need this new education, which is STEAM, which is not only just scientific, but also based on arts, which is the letter A in STEM. Let us have the next one. And so this is a way, you know, from book to book, like writing these books helped me understand various aspects that need reform, that need attention and more focus. Some of them were presented here, and I'm glad that I'm back here at the Kyiv National University, where we presented some of these books. And this was the Legacy Ukraine presentation quite just before the Corona crisis. And this was good because now some people in this list, the famous people of Ukrainian origin, are helping Ukraine and raising money for Ukraine in different parts of the world, and we will continue this process for sure. So we presented our books at universities in Ukraine, Kyiv University, the Shevchenko University, and other universities. Next one. And then we came to this time of the war, when, in fact, it started even in the Corona time, but when these two gigatrends, they are not fully visible in the screen, but what I mean by gigatrends, I should introduce, it's basically the term that I introduced, and we can have all these trends that seem to be pervasive, but then when the new black swan comes, we need to think what can happen next. So we need to think what is happening in the background. And two processes, well, one process is evident, it is technological advantages and disruptions, but there is another process that is sort of playing in the back, which is creativity. And for example, the maker spaces that at some stage became the fashionable word in America, and then they are becoming popular in other parts of the world. Like during the earthquakes, during all these disruptions, the local labs, local maker spaces are used, for example, with the 3D printers, to print things that are suddenly not available, that when the supply chains are disrupted, when the shipments are disrupted. So this is the process when people can keep their life going with the local processes, local production. And this is also part of our education programs, but let us go to the next one. What it all comes to, it is a big scheme here. I tried to show just some of the important processes that are happening and that are also covered in this my new book, 2030 Lessons for Ukraine. What is basically happening, it is when we have the circle of circles, and this is innovation cycle. So if we want economy to be innovation driven and knowledge based, so we have this circle of education, innovations, and science, which also are all linked to the society and its demands. So if we want the knowledge flows, the innovation readiness and development, we need to have this circle of circles functioning. So let us go on to the next one. And here is an example of why it is so important, because, for example, if we are talking about the war and its current very different form from what it was before, this is an example where I show how all these processes are coming together. There is the famous word singularity, when sort of all of human knowledge and skills are coming together. So the traditional war, classical war, is land, maritime, and air. Well, actually, air is also more or less new, but in the 21st century, we have also important dimensions like space, like the outer space, and cyberspace. So all of these need to be taken into account. Unfortunately, people who have knowledge of these all domains are rare. And when we are talking about interaction and interoperability, this is a new term which some people learn only recently, but when we have interoperability, we need understanding of all these 5 domains, but there is also another one, which I will talk about in the next slide. No, actually, it will be another one, but now I want also to focus that it is all knowledge society, which is important for the economy and for the defense and for all of the sectors of our life, that it is all scientific based. For example, when we have the air defense, we need to know all the math and physics of how our rocket comes to meet the target rocket, and so that we don't have any explosions in the city or in Ukraine in general. And so it's a complex science, but it's but you know it should all be there, and we should not lose this knowledge despite the war, despite all the disruptions. Because we need the tools for the new society, which are critical, and they are critical at all stages of our life, from design and production to use and maintenance. Okay, next one. And this complex science, it is, you know, I mentioned that now we have 5 dimensions of the war, but in fact, there are even more than that, because, for example, energy can be used as a weapon, and quantum computers can be used to break all the security codes. And so, for example, if we come to this esoteric place like CERN, the Center for Nuclear Research of Europe, they seem to explore some esoteric things like the outset of the universe, like these microparticles. But in fact, all of this knowledge is important in our everyday life, like, as I mentioned, when we are talking about the quantum level physics, and when we are talking about energy as a weapon. Next one. So this, what is all of this about? We need to have all of this implemented and integrated in our education. We do it from the school, from the secondary school and even primary school level, and the same is happening at the universities. And basically, the idea of the next university, of the university of the future, it's also described in this book that I am proud to present today, and I thank my dear colleagues that I had the chance to make this presentation, because as a graduate of Shevchenko University, it's really pleasant to me to present this book here at the walls of my alma mater. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Vakarin, for your speech, for your presentation, and for your constant support of all our university projects for these years. And now I want to invite our next speaker, Daniel Malikov, the ambassador of Legacy Ukraine, with a speech, the importance of sharing stories of outstanding Ukrainians internationally in building up support for reconstruction, please.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for the kind invitation to the conference. Very pleased to have a chance to have a quick, concise speech. To give myself a very quick introduction, I'm the co-founder of a project called Legacy Ukraine, which is a publications and media project dedicated to sharing the stories of the most outstanding Ukrainians or people with Ukrainian origins who have done something impactful or important around the world. And a quick message that I would like to share with you today is the importance of spreading things such as the impact of Ukrainians around the world for the consequent reconstruction of Ukraine. Because obviously there have been some more technical speeches, which maybe is not exactly my profession, that explain more the aspect of the implementation of the reconstruction itself, while what I would like to share is the importance of keeping the attention of people who are going to be supporting this reconstruction and providing them information that will show the importance of this reconstruction. And what I mean by that is, for instance, with the means of our project, we continue to spread this message about outstanding Ukrainians, such as, for example, or people of Ukrainian origins, such as, for instance, Steve Wozniak. And the more people who are in the US and who are supporting the government that in return is supporting the reconstruction of Ukraine, a big majority of them have held or are holding right now an iPhone in their hands and are doing a lot of their work on a MacBook, and interfere with something that has been impacted by a person with Ukrainian origins on a daily basis. And sharing this message, I think, is important to give people around the world more understanding of how Ukraine has already impacted their life, which in return could give them more motivation of supporting the consequent reconstruction of the country. More so, I feel like an important step of the reconstruction will be to continue spreading and showing the things that are possible to be done in Ukraine that have been done before in the face of successful IT projects and projects in any other areas that have been successful inside Ukraine or that originated in Ukraine, went abroad, because obviously we can expect a certain amount of government support from the countries that we are friendly with as Ukraine, but also we feel that it is important to have businesses still be able to see opportunities within Ukraine and entrepreneurs still be able to see opportunities within Ukraine to invest in either existing businesses or set up their businesses, considering the amount of professionals in certain areas such as IT or such as media. A lot of the creative spheres have been quite successful coming from Ukraine. So from my side, the message that I just wanted to say today is to maybe keep finding out about these stories, keep looking for interesting projects that could be successful in Ukraine, and to stay inspired to create something like that of your own, and to share those stories outwards when there's such a chance to show what people with Ukrainian origins or Ukrainians are able to do, how they're able to impact the life of people who are very, very measurably far away from Ukraine. And I think this could really help build up the support for the consequent reconstruction.
Thank you, Mr. Malikov, for your help, for our fruitful cooperation and the support of our initiatives. And now we are coming to our next speaker. He is Andreas Umland. He is analyst of Stockholm Center for Eastern European Studies. So please, give you the word.
Дуже дякую. Я розмовляю українською, але я так розумію, що тут, мабуть, буде краще говорити англійською, тому я скажу англійською. I was thinking about submitting a paper for the conference, but in fact, I had already published in January my views on it in a report for my center called How the West Can Help Ukraine. It was also published in Ukrainian on the website of Kritika, and in Ukraine by Ukrainska Pravda, so you can look it up there. I just asked here to say a few words because the comparison with the Marshall Plan, I think, is very good as a metaphor to motivate people to create some historical reference point. It's also a positive story. Of course, the Marshall Plan was an enormously successful program. It has also certain similarities to the current situation in Ukraine. It's also, it was after war, it was a large program. It was a program of integrating Germany into the West. It was also a recovery program, but what I wanted to briefly mention here is that there are also certain fallacies connected to the Marshall Plan metaphor, which make it, which can actually lead to, I would say, misjudgment. The most obvious one here, which has perhaps no political consequences, is that the Marshall Plan has become largely famous in relation to Germany. Although it was much larger for France and Britain, but because the German post-war development has been so successful, the Marshall Plan is often then related to Germany, and of course Germany is very different from Ukraine, and in that way is a post-war Germany, and in that way it's actually a miscomparison because Germany was the aggressor. Germany suffered from a defeat. And there have been now, for instance, people in Russia who have argued that Russia should actually get a Marshall Plan, yeah, because they also saw certain similarities to fascist Germany. So they, you know, their thinking is, well, Germany got the Marshall Plan after Hitler devastated Germany. So Russia should perhaps get a Marshall Plan after Putin devastated Russia. So this is, of course, then can lead you to wrong conclusions. I think a big fallacy, and I'm here with a colleague from the German Ukrainian Forum, Andreas von Schumann, who is not related to Robert Schumann, by the way, who is discussing this a lot for the German Ukrainian Forum in Germany. These topics you're discussing here are big topics in Stockholm and in Berlin. Andreas von Schumann is sitting here behind me. He has been very much emphasizing here in Ukraine the fact that there will be no so-called Stunde Null, no 0 hour. In Germany, the Marshall Plan started after the 0 hour, after the total defeat, after a large destruction of Germany, and after basically a reset of Germany after Hitler was gone, and then you had this sort of starting from zero, from a point zero. This will not be here and cannot be the point here. What we will have in Ukraine is rather a Marshall Plan that should be implemented, where we will have different degrees of war and peace, and we have to start it, so to say, before the 0 hour. Before, we should not wait here, because that is something that then some people in the West may think, oh, we will now wait until Ukraine will have resolved its issues with Russia, and then we will start. This should not be the conclusion from the Marshall Plan metaphor. We should not wait now for hour 0, like it was in Germany. So this can be another fallacy of the Marshall Plan metaphor. A third fallacy of the Marshall Plan metaphor is that with the Marshall Plan, you had one donor and various recipients of the donations, where the countries that received donations from the US. And as I said, Germany was actually not the first recipient. France and Great Britain received much larger amounts, but in Germany, as I said, became most famous because Germany had this enormous recovery in connection also to the Marshall Plan. In Ukraine, we will have the opposite situation. We will have many donors and one country. And that creates very specific problems that have very little to do actually with post-war German development. So you have here one of the biggest issues is going to be, and is in fact already, donor coordination. So you have various state organizations, you have national governments, you have international organizations, you have non-governmental organizations, and they have to coordinate their help. And you have also here, I think, on the receiving side, of course, on the Ukrainian side, and that has been already mentioned by the previous speakers, a different situation in that the question is who should actually get which donation, and what should be the way here for it to go. In Germany, that was relatively easy. That was sort of in a rather different context. So that is also, I think, that can be a fallacy here. It's going to be here more complicated because you have so many donors, and also because the scale is of course very large here in Ukraine. And the final big difference is going to be here that, of course, the Ukrainian recovery and rebuilding and modernization is very closely linked and should be as closely as possible linked to European integration. So when Germany got the Marshall Plan, there were already, as Professor Kosicki mentioned, already some plans for European integration, but the Rome treaties were only signed in 1957, and the European Economic Community, the predecessor of the European Union, started functioning only in 1958. Long after the Marshall Plan had kicked in. In Ukraine, this is very different. Here we will have this specific challenge of actually sort of creating both externally and internally a new Ukraine, I would say, integrated into the European Union, also with a different economy, as was mentioned here. Whereas for Germany, actually, the paradox of Germany was that it was very much destroyed, but the economy was, the industrial capacity was still there. And with Germany, you basically had to restart the already existing industry that had actually largely survived, oddly enough, World War II. In Ukraine, that is, of course, a very different situation. In many situations, it may make sense actually to not restart older companies, but actually to perhaps create new ones. But of course, there are also very, very good already existing Ukrainian companies that need to extend their activity. So I just wanted to mention that that is also something not in the publication I had already out here, also in Ukraine, on how the West can help Ukraine. These are additional points to what I've already published here in Ukraine. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for your point of view. And I think that your speech is interesting, that we have to restart and rebuild our Ukraine, restore our Ukraine immediately, not wait to that 0 point. Yes. And as to the metaphor, yes, we can have different perspectives, different points. And for that, we gathered here. And I think that we in sections will have discussions, we will have different thoughts, opinions. Someone will support, someone will be opposed to this metaphor even. Not only on some practical, on the historical perspectives and historical experiences, but thank you again for your interesting point of view and your thoughts. And now, as I see that Sviatoslav Yurash he is not with us now, so I think that we should come to our sections, to our discussions. And I remind you that there will be 3 sections. The first section is post-war reconstruction of Ukraine, the search for a strategy, problems and prospects. The second section is reconstruction of Western countries after World War I and World War II. And the third section is about Ukraine and the world in the post-war international relations, history and present. And now we'll have 5 to 7 minutes, some break, and you should join our sections after the Zoom links and the meetings which are described and which are mentioned in our program. So we will wait you in the sections format after the 5-7 minutes. Thank you again.
Thank you.